Let's move on, though, into the next team. We're almost at the end, Sean. Almost there. We got two more left. Looking at the South Carolina Gamecocks in this segment of the podcast. And this is a team kind of turned some heads last year. Definitely turned my head. Going 9-4 overall, 5-3 in the conference last year. This is a team that, I mean, mainly for me, I wasn't expecting it because, I mean, Will Muschamp teams don't really expect 9 wins, and especially 6-7 his first year, 3-5 in the conference. But this is a South Carolina team where, to me, the biggest question that I'll start with is, yeah, you've got on defense, they have to replace a ton of pieces, and that could be a problem. But to me, I usually look to offense. That's just the kind of guy that I am. And to me, the two big questions for offense is, number one, what are we going to see under the new offensive coordinator of Brian McClendon, who is now Muschamp's 4th offensive coordinator in his 7 seasons as a head coach? And what kind of a quarterback wide receiver combination are we going to see because of that? What do you think for this offense with a now new offensive coordinator yet again for a Will Muschamp team?
Well, the biggest thing is they need to pick it up on the offensive side. I mean, this is one of the worst offenses in the SEC. I mean, obviously we know what Muschamp can do with defenses, but the McClellan needs to really be able to bring in a
who's
fresh
an in-house
change.
guy, by the way.
Yeah, he needs to bring a fresh change, and I think he's talking about going to an up-tempo offense. I think that's going to be the biggest thing for them is if they're able to at least tire out a defense and then have the offense go up against that monster of a defense in South Carolina. That's going to be something huge, because if you're able to keep the opposing defenses on their toes and then consistently have them keep coming out because you keep shutting down the opposition on 4 and outs, on short drives, that's going to tire them out, and that's going to make you open up the offense, open them up left and right. And you look to that Outback Bowl where they did have success against Michigan, and Michigan was a fantastic defense last year. That was the bright spot of that Michigan team. And you look what Jake Bentley did: 239 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interceptions. You look at the receiving; they had a couple guys. They had pretty much most of their guys. Hayden Hurst was one of them. Obviously, he's gone, but they had guys with 5 catches, 3 catches, 3 catches, 4 catches. They were able to at least include a lot of different guys, and that was with their leading rusher only having 45 yards on the ground. So I think the biggest thing for South Carolina is just having consistent guys out there, and it's really not having a star wide receiver out there like an Alshon Jeffrey or Hayden Hurst, who was a star for them. I think it's just more having consistent guys that they can go to, and consistent guys that they can continue to run out on the field and just do something for them, make them have a contribution, keep that offense up pace, and again, slowing down some of these quick, fast-paced SEC defenses. And if they're able to keep those SEC defenses on their toes, that's going to be massive. They were able to do that against Michigan. I think that's going to be probably the key for them to have success this year.
Well, and the thing that I'm kind of leaning to and kind of seeing with some of McClendon's quotes that he's been saying is it kind of seems like he's going to go more of an up-tempo style. I'm not talking like Chip Kelly up-tempo, but more so maybe like what I know you and I, when we were in college doing the sports media thing also, they're kind of the up-tempo that we're used to of like quarterback. And it's not a full huddle. It's, all right, get to the line, go to the side, get the play, all right, come back, hike. And one of the quotes I've got here from McClendon said, it's really simple. The more plays you run, the more opportunity you get for yards and points. You just get more at-bats. That's the biggest thing. We're going to try to keep snapping the ball and keep getting points. That's the plan. We want to be balanced and stay aggressive and be in attack mode as much as possible. And part of me likes this because part of me feels like, based off of the schedule that they got played this year, how is that Georgia game, number 2 overall, second week of the season, going to play out with that mentality? Because to be honest, with this mentality, without this mentality, most people are expecting them to beat Coastal Carolina. I don't care if Coastal Carolina played a close game against an SEC team last year. Most teams are expecting, if you're from the SEC, to beat Coastal Carolina. And it was, I believe, let me see, what was that close game that they had? Oh, it was Arkansas. Arkansas, they only lost 39-38. But to me, it's that Georgia game. If you come out against Georgia, a Georgia team that's going to be playing Austin Peay in its first game, so not the most struggling of teams in that first week. If you come out against Georgia, especially getting the ball first, what if you win the coin toss? You say, we want the ball, we're going to score, Matt Hasselbeck style, and then you, quick offense, boom, 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 punch Georgia in the face right away. Score first on them on that drive without taking much time off the board. What is that going to do tempo-wise for an early game, which part of me coming in looking at the schedule was like, oh, you're playing Georgia that soon? I don't know how confident I am about that.
I look at the schedule and I love it. I'm disagreeing with you. I love the schedule because you look at it, 3 games at home. Then you go 2-game break. You go to Vanderbilt, which should be a winnable game, and Kentucky should be a winnable game. And then you look at 3 straight games at home. Missouri, Texas A&M, Tennessee, all of those winnable games, all of those at home. Then you take a 2-game break. You go on the road. Ole Miss, Florida. 2 tougher opponents, but still winnable games. And then you come back, Chattanooga, Clemson, both at home. Clemson's going to be a tough game, but still, you're at home. And the biggest thing is you're getting, time off. You're playing at home for consecutive stretches. You're not going back, forth, back, forth, back, forth. I absolutely love this schedule. Yes, are you going to have tough teams? Yes, but every SEC team is going to. And you have the 2 hardest opponents on your schedule at home, Georgia and Clemson, and they are miles apart. Start of the season, end of the season. Love this schedule for South Carolina. And you talk about the up-tempo and at least...
You said Clemson's at home?
Oh, Clemson, South Carolina.
Clemson's on the road.
My bad. Still in South Carolina. I saw C and then South Carolina. Yeah. I just thought it was Columbia. My bad. But still...
It's in Death Valley, baby.
Yeah, but still...
Running down that ramp.
End of the edge of the season.
Yeah.
You start pretty much with Georgia. You end with Clemson. And it's still in South Carolina.
Gamecock
it's not like
fans might still think it's a home game because it's in the state.
That's the thing. That's
so
why
close.
It's an in-state rival. So I look at this and you talk about the hypothetical of what if they start quick against Georgia. It's Georgia. I mean, they were just
they got
in a
a really good
championship.
defense too, so I don't expect it to happen.
And they were in a national championship game. And they've faced adversity before. Kirby Smart is a great coach. I don't think that's going to rattle Georgia. I don't think it's going to take them off their knocks. Do I think South Carolina can pull off an upset? Yeah. You're bringing Jake Fromm into Columbia. If he's not right with his wide receivers, if he's not ready, and he did go up against an Alabama team in the national championship game and looked fairly decent, but quarterbacks have bad days, and if this is one of his bad days, South Carolina could pull off that upset.
And the thing with don't mean to cut you off, but with the McClendon comment is not necessarily knocking Georgia back and being like, whoa, what's going on here? But more importantly, if you want to beat a team like Georgia, if you want to beat a team like Florida, some of these, what we think would be top-tier teams, really to me, maybe Clemson and Georgia defensively are going to be the 2 best defensive teams that South Carolina plays. I kind of feel like you want to have that attack dog mentality of we're going to be on the aggressive front. We're going to attack you. We're not going to sit back and wait and melt clock. We're going to attack you every second we get to try to tire you out and knock at that defense and then find our little spots by keeping up tempo to score some points.
Yeah, I think it's something that it's going to take time for the South Carolina offense to adjust to, but if they're able to adjust to it during the offseason, then yeah, I mean, if you're going up against Georgia that's not expecting this, that only saw it against Coastal Carolina, it could be something where maybe they even hold back a little bit against Coastal Carolina because they know they can beat Coastal Carolina. Yeah. They can win it with their defense, and especially if they start off quick and that defense really starts to pull away and it becomes a bit of a blowout, then they start to slow it down a bit. That could be something where Georgia hasn't seen the full power of this offense. It could be something that they can use as a disguise, and you're bringing back a solid quarterback. I mean, Jake Bentley, he's now in his 3rd year. He's a guy that had a really great season last year, 18 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, completed a ton of passes, 62% on the year, near 3,000 yards. I love that from a sophomore quarterback. He's just going to get better. He's going to be a guy that possibly puts himself into NFL, draft talks, 6'4", 224 body, can complete some passes. If he's able to have a really decent year, 25 touchdowns, and keep that interception number around 12, he can be a guy that puts himself into some really high quality names and possibly put himself into the top 3 rounds of the NFL draft. So this is a team that if Jake Bentley's able to fit into this offense, they already have a very veteran play caller that has talent. So it's going to be something where, again, if they're able to adjust to that during the summer, and especially trusting McClellan because he's been in camp, it's going to be something, again, where South Carolina can possibly pull off some upsets against Clemson, against Georgia, and maybe put themselves near the top of the SEC East.
And it's weird. For most of this podcast, I've been saying, biggest question, offensive side of the ball. This is one of the first teams. Biggest question for me, defensive side of the ball. Yeah, they have third-year coordinator, Tavares Robinson back, which that's not the question. The question for me is Robinson, who is a guy that will be in talks for head coaching positions at the end of the year, sooner rather than later will be a future head coach in college football. It's just going to happen. But he had to replace a lot of guys, especially up the middle. And then they also have guys like the safety position, that secondary, which could be a little bit of a work in progress this season. So for me, that's my question mark. Will the offense be, and this is kind of the double-edged sword, if you're going to be up-tempo trying to get more at-bats, if you keep scoring and it's like, we scored in, let's say, 2 minutes. We scored in a minute and a half. Is that then going to hurt this defense? Because it's like, great, we had to try to find guys. We probably don't have the most depth. And now our defense is getting tired because they're out on the field more. However, it's a little yin and yang because I'd rather be out on the field with a 21-point lead than out on the field a lot with a 21-point deficit.
We're talking about a team that, again, has a coach in place. This isn't an SEC East team that's a revolving door of coaches. Will Muschamp's been there for 3 years. And if Will Muschamp has proven anything in his coaching career is that he can put out a good defense. I mean, even though he wasn't successful at Florida, he put out a good defense. He got a head coaching job because he could put out a good defense. Yeah, they might not be depth, full of depth, but they have talent, and they have a good head coach, and they have a good defensive coordinator. I'm not really worried about this defense. Yeah, if injuries come about like they usually do in football seasons, it's going to be a blow to the Gamecocks. But if they're able to keep their stars out on the field, I think Muschamp will do enough and make sure those deficiencies on defense are hidden while really making those additions, those positives shine on that defense. So I'm not really worried about that defense. I'm worried about the offense just because how will they adjust to the pace of play. But I see South Carolina, at worst, if they're not able to adjust, as probably the third best team in the SEC East. And if they have a great season, maybe even number one. If they're able to knock off Georgia and they both finish with one loss, well, they have a tiebreaker against Georgia. So
yeah.
I think that's going to be the biggest thing is how well are you going to play against Clemson? How well are you going to play against South Carolina? Because you'd be favored in every other game pretty much. It's just you're not going to be favored in those two games, and you got to come out, and I think you got to have strong showings in both of them. They can be a team that sticks around the top 25 for a while throughout the season, especially after that Georgia game. If they're able to pick up a couple wins, like 5 or 6 wins after that Georgia game, this could be a team that maybe hits the top 15.
It's funny because most of this podcast, before we got into Carolina, I was like, I'm probably going to be a little bit lower on Carolina. But after looking at it, I'm not going to be that low on Carolina. Like, this is a schedule, and this is a team that I look at. For me, 2 for-sure losses in my mind. Could change my mind. Not saying that the real world is going to be what I say. I don't think they beat Georgia. I don't think they beat Clemson because for me, Georgia's an all-around great team. Kirby Smart's built that team and their national championship caliber. I'd be surprised if that team isn't in the playoff hunt end of the year. Then with Clemson, I don't know quarterback-wise if they're going to have a Deshaun Watson-level guy back behind center. However, this defense, I cannot wait to talk about them. They are going to be stacked. Todd McShay came out with his first way too early mock draft, like right after the NFL draft. Most of the guys in that first round, Clemson and Ohio State defensive players. Like, this team is stacked defensively. And plus, to me, because of that, and in the coaching side, I'm giving the coaching
to Dabo.
Because Dabo, to me, is the better head coach when it comes to him and Will Muschamp. To me, there's only 3 games that I could see losses, and that third one's a question mark because I could see South Carolina winning it. The only reason I put it as a question mark is it's in the swamp is Florida. And to me, that could be it. Though at the most, those 3 losses. If you go more than that, it's because a team like Texas A&M or a team like Tennessee or a team like Kentucky surprised you, where you were the favorite, but they just surprised you in the end, or they got a last-second field goal kick and got the upset on you. But for me, an absolutely like dive bomb season this year for the Gamecocks, 4 losses. The best year you're looking at, 2 wins. However, if you exceed my 2 losses, your expectations, though, if you exceed mine, 1 loss at the least. However, I'm going 2 in mine.
I'll probably end on 2 losses, but I think best scenario is you end up with 1 loss, whether that's to Georgia or whether it's an upset. But I think this team isn't going to go undefeated in the SEC East.
Could you imagine if they beat Georgia, win the tiebreaker, and play in Alabama or in Auburn in the SEC title game?
It'd be fun, man. Especially if that's Georgia's only loss. Could you imagine that? Like then it's like, and if South Carolina loses in the SEC championship game. Could you imagine what that would do if Georgia going back in? We'll talk about Georgia in a little bit, but again, Georgia, being the runners-up, losing 1 game early in the season, what would that do? Especially because you didn't win your conference. It's gonna be interesting to see.
No, what is even more not impressive, but interesting is last week when Brandon and I looked at the other side, I mentioned with Alabama and Auburn that I could see with those 2 teams Auburn wins the Iron Bowl or Alabama wins the Iron Bowl, and that's the only loss for the other team. So that it's, all right, that's our only loss. You then won the SEC. You're the 1 seed. I'm the 4 seed. Let's go round 2. And if that team that you beat, let's say Auburn wins the Iron Bowl, then Alabama 1 loss, Auburn no losses, then Auburn plays South Carolina and beats them, that could be a situation that then sets up the SEC to have another 2 teams in their conference yet again. But before we move on, like you said, we haven't talked about Georgia yet. They're the last team we'll get to. Any final thoughts about the Gamecocks and Will Muschamp's boys?
Not really. I think this is just something that, again, Muschamp is probably a season where he probably needs to define whether he's going to be one of those great coaches or if he's just going to be a mediocre coach. Because again, he's been able to get wins, but he's never been able to get to those big name bowls. So I think he's a thing where this is probably a possible career defining season. Because you have the quarterback in place, you have the offense in place. The defense isn't great, but you're known as a defensive coach. So I think that's the one thing is if Muschamp has a great season, it's going to really define his legacy.
His best year when it came to either at Florida or SC was in 2012, where his team only lost 2 games. They lost to number 12 Georgia. This was when Florida was the 3rd-ranked team in the country, and then they lost their bowl game in the Sugar Bowl when they were 4th ranked, or losing at 2-ranked 22 Louisville. So that's the best season he's ever had, is an 11-2 year. Could probably, if everything goes right, have a similar season like that with South Carolina this year. But this is where you guys come in. Let us know what you think down below in that comment section. Too high on the Gamecocks? Are we, I don't want to say we're too low. We didn't have them below 4 losses. Basically, are we too high on the Gamecocks? What do you think of their new offensive philosophy they're going to put in place? And how many wins and losses would you have for them in 2018? Let us know what you think down below in that comment section.